D-Mace Fingan and Donick 1025, 1063 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. And we are indeed presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, David Janes here with you again. As I said yesterday, it's always DVD as long as I'm here. Donick, Vingan, and David. Derek Mason will be on again with Jake Lyman today from 3 to 6. Chase and Big Joe from noon to 3. And gentlemen, we almost had a schoolyard bash as we switched shows because Joe Rexroad doesn't think you like him very much, Willie Donick, because yesterday we played Jared versus Joe, or at least a part of Jared versus Joe, to have a conversation about the Nashville Predators. And you listened to that Jared versus Joe. And I didn't say this yesterday, but when I texted you the podcast to listen to, you said, am I going to be able to make it through this? And I said, yes, I think you are. And you were pleasantly surprised by how, what's the word I'm looking for? Engaging? No, not engaging. Enthralling the conversation that Jared and Joe had. Because as we know, Jared versus Joe can devolve into shouting. But Joe was offended. Joe was offended that you were skeptical that he and Jared could have a nuanced conversation of sorts.
Let me apologize to Joe. I did not mean to make it like this. I was being sarcastic. I would say that Jared brings out a lot of rage at times in all of us. And I have not been nose to nose with Jared week to week like Joe is. But I have heard that segment get to where everybody's talking at the same time. It's hard to understand what the point is, but I was commending them because, especially with the Predators stuff, I think they hit the perfect debate on what it is they're facing right now. They've got an older team on one side of the ledger that was brought in to win now, and they've got a large pool of prospects that they're trying to bring along that will be critical for the long-term success of the franchise and for the GM. I thought they did a really good job. So, Joe, I apologize. I did not mean to insinuate that you were always yelling or whatever you were saying at the end of the show. As I was listening, I was like, wait a minute. I was only talking about the Jared versus Joe at times where they go off the rails, and that does happen every now and then.
One of my favorite...
And it's usually Jared's fault.
It is. One of my favorite moments, and I wish I could find it, but one time it got so bad on Jared versus Joe that Jared told Joe to shut up, and Joe goes, "You shut up!" Like two bickering brothers. "You shut up. No, you shut up." That's what happens sometimes. But I would like to start today's show by congratulating the Dallas Mavericks on the opportunity to draft Cooper Flagg. Please take good care of him for me, will you? Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks won the NBA draft lottery last night. They had just a 1.8% chance to win the lottery and jumped 10 spots to grab the top pick, which according to ESPN, Willie Donick, is the biggest move by any team in NBA lottery history.
Give me the card from the deck.
Jeff Darlington
reference that you said. I think this puts it in perspective here.
Jeff Darlington of ESPN tweeted this last night. Quote, "The Dallas Mavericks had a 1.8% chance to land that top pick. They had a better chance of drawing a specific card from a 52 card deck, 1.92% chance, than winning tonight's lottery."
So it's the old 52 card pickup. If all those cards were face down and you said, without having any knowledge of where the cards were, I'm going to go pick out the ace of spades, you would have a better chance of doing that than winning the lottery last night. That's a low chance. But that's the rules, right? And this is the opposite. It's the exhilaration for Dallas and of course the chagrin of everybody around the league. And the Predators had the opposite, where they dropped 2 spots after having way, way better odds of having a better outcome than they did. And in both cases, in the hockey drawing of the ping pong balls, 2 teams moved up the maximum 10 spots. So it does bring out the philosophical question of what's the best way to do a lottery,
which we will discuss.
or should you even have a lottery?
We will discuss that today because, as you could imagine, the conspiracy theories are
Well, I'm not
bountiful.
about that. Let me
I
just
know.
say, I am not about the conspiracy theories.
I know, but
and I remember the very first lottery that ever happened when the Knicks won Patrick Ewing in the ping pong ball deal. Immediately, there was the conspiracy theory from day one. So
was that the frozen envelope?
Yes.
Yeah, well, you got all that stuff, right? There was all kinds of stuff written Can you imagine if you had the internet and social media at that point, how crazy things would have been? The Knicks were bad, though. It's not like they were like the Mavericks that were actually in the playoffs, so to speak.
And
right? That's another phase of this that I think should be discussed.
We will get into the pros and cons of draft lottery systems because, as Willie mentioned, the New York Islanders had a 3.5% chance to win the number 1 overall pick in the NHL draft lottery last week and ultimately did. So we will discuss draft lotteries. But you mentioned the Knicks. The Knicks were on the court last night. They take a 3-1 lead on the Celtics, who lost Jason Tatum to a gruesome leg injury, or at least it appears gruesome, a non-contact lower leg injury. I think we can assume it might be an Achilles injury. I don't think that's been announced yet. But the Knicks take a 3-1 series lead on the Celtics. And how's this for a statistic for you, Willie Donick? The New York Knicks are the first team in NBA history to have 3 comeback wins after being down 9+ points at halftime in a single playoff series. They were down 16 in game 1, 9 in game 2, and 11 in game 4 at halftime, and won all 3 games.
And it may be just me. It doesn't seem like there's a single NBA game now that you should, because our brains are still wired to watch a basketball game and think if one team gets up by 15 or 20 points, the game's over. But I think we have to continue to rewire our brains, especially in the NBA, where there's a 24-second shot clock and every guy on the court, with just a couple of exceptions, but nearly every guy on the court can hit threes. No lead is safe. Like, you almost don't want to be up by that much because it's a human nature. You let your guard down a little bit and the other team starts coming back. And now it's almost like the Knicks, they know their way to beat. That's how they're going to beat the Celtics. Fall behind, get the momentum, and then blow by them.
And it's unfortunate for Jason Tatum in the Celtics. Tatum was having an outstanding game. He had 42 points, I believe, at the time of the injury. And just insult to injury, no pun intended, with Jason Tatum going down, the Celtics going down 3-1 in the series. That was hard to watch. Also, some compelling games in the NHL and the Stanley Cup playoffs last night, particularly the game in Edmonton. That was a spicy game. I don't know if you watched that, Willie Donick, but
I did.
Anytime the goalie gets involved in the scrum, that's when you know it's a good game. And Adin Hill, the Golden Knights goaltender, the Oilers were targeting him throughout that first period. They were finding every way to bump him and get in his kitchen, and he was reacting. And when I believe it was Adam Henrique scored the second goal, one of Adin Hill's teammates pushed Evander Kane into Adin Hill, trucks him. Hill gets up and immediately goes after Evander Kane. Anytime a goalie, and you know, Willie, most of the times when those scrums happen, the goalie, he skates away. He goes to the opposite corner. He lets his teammates handle it. Anytime a goalie gets involved, I love that. So
you loved it. I wonder if Bruce Cassidy loved it.
I'm sure he didn't. But Edmonton wins 3-0. They're up 3-1 in that series.
Edmonton really dominated for 60 minutes. Now, that was a game that they started well, and it never really changed, unlike the NBA games that seem to go back and forth more. And we've had plenty of hockey games in the playoffs that have had lead changes and comebacks and all of that. But Vegas is in big trouble. Adin Hill has not played very well. This is another, not to bring up Robbie and Joe here and Jared, but their argument of you don't really need the great goalie if you play great defense. That's being tested here because Vegas does have a great defense that can corral. And we're going to talk about the ability to defend today and where the Predators need to make strides in that area. because they're nowhere in the same stratosphere as these teams that are still playing right now. At least they weren't last year. But Vegas has contained, and this is maybe the most difficult team to contain. When you're trying to contain Draisaitl and McDavid, it's hard to do that. Vegas does a reasonable job of doing that, but Adin Hill has not played anywhere near like he did a couple of years ago when he sort of was their hero, came out of nowhere to help them win the title.
And the Golden Knights needed a buzzer-beating goal with 0.4 seconds to win the one game they've won in this series, which was a lot of buzzer beaters we've seen in these Stanley Cup playoffs.
And isn't it interesting that Edmonton's doing this without Matthias Ekholm? Dallas has gotten to where they are. They're in the driver's seat of their series without Miro Heiskanen, who I guess they're going to get back fairly soon. It could be in this game coming up, this next game. Maybe. They haven't. Their morning skate is coming up. We might get a clue or two here before this show is over. But team defense is huge. And even Edmonton, without a guy like Matthias Ekholm, is defending really, really well. And they've got a lousy goalie tandem, and that's still their weak link, but they're finding a way to get by.
Nate on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says, "Come on, Adam. Hill didn't get trucked. His own teammate shoved an Oiler into him," which is what I said, I think. Also, Hill is worse than Crawford, I assume, meaning Corey Crawford, ever was when it comes to embellishing and antics and getting away with it.
In fact, I do think that he's right in that, you know what they did? They actually called a penalty on, who was it, Kane?
Kane was pushed into Hill.
Right. And Kane got called for charging. He got called for charging.
I believe the Golden Knights ended up with a power play out of that entire
and that was a bad call, I thought, because Braden McNabb was the one he shoved Evander Kane,
who then trucked Adin Hill because he was pushed.
And I don't know that Evander Kane really tried to slow down. Yes, but Kane was like charging. Charging is when you like take a run up to somebody. So I thought that was a weird use of the rule book there. But either way, it's been great late night hockey, and there's going to be more tonight because I want to see if Winnipeg can come up with a road plan to stay in the series because they're on the brink here.
Can Connor Hellebuyck win a road playoff game?
Was he 0 for his last 8 on the road?
Sounds about right. Hasn't been good on the road. I wonder what the Jets are doing to try to give Connor Hellebuyck the comforts of home on the road. You know, maybe bring some tchotchkes from home, some pictures, his favorite chair, something like that.
Pieces of flair.
Yes, to recreate that home feeling because Connor Hellebuyck cannot win on the road. I'm looking up to see what his numbers are over the past 2 postseasons on the road. They are not good. Connor Hellebuyck, over the past 2 postseasons on the road, is 0-6. And that doesn't include if he lost a road playoff game the year before that. But he's 0-6 over the past 2 postseasons on the road with a .623 goals against average and .814 save percentage.
Yikes. And I think it even goes back before that. But I think it's 8 in a row going back to that one. But either way, it's in their head right now. They also got kind of a weird goal that went against them, a 7 or 8 minute delay in that game 3 that they were really in for a while. They're right in it. Dallas pulled away late, but Dallas is looking more and more like the complete team. If they can mesh Heiskanen into the lineup, that you can argue that of all the really good players they have, Heiskanen is their best player. If they can get him going, that might take them to a level that I don't know where they don't light up all the lights, right? They're a complete team. Ottinger is a really good goalie that's playing really well.
I think Jake Ottinger, by the way.
I don't like Dallas, but I got to give it. I think they're the best team left right now, especially if they add that element.
I think Jake Ottinger, by the way, is playing himself into USA starter in the Olympics territory. Of course, the goaltender on the other side of the rink in this series, Connor Hellebuyck, who started every game in the Four Nations faceoff. He is the presumed starter. But with how things are going for Connor Hellebuyck lately in the postseason, I wonder if Jake Ottinger may become the starting goaltender for Team USA in the Olympics. By the way,
It's a good problem, right?
right. I guess the Olympics are in Italy next year, right? Those are road games, right? You don't want Connor Hellebuck playing games in
Those
Italy.
are road games.
Those are road games. But tomorrow, by the way, is the moment you've all been waiting for. The NFL schedule will be released.
Yes.
And we've already seen some marquee games get announced.
Ooh.
The Eagles will host the Cowboys to open the season on Thursday, September 4th. The Bears will play at the Eagles on Black Friday. The Broncos will play at the Chiefs on Christmas Day. And the NFL announced this morning the slate of international games. And there is one spot open, the team playing the Chargers in Brazil on Friday, September 5th. Now, the Titans do play the Chargers this season, but it's a home game. And I believe the Chargers are the designated home team for this game in Brazil. So I don't think the Titans are going to be in that spot. So it does not appear that the Titans will be going abroad.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Do people really like look at this in suspense, like refresh their computer
Yes.
and look
They're making a whole
the
show of
minute
it.
that comes? the
NFL
next one?
Network is going to have a show on this tomorrow, and it's going to do big ratings. People care about this. I don't know why, but they do.
Just boggles my mind.
It would be different if
I know I can't win the argument,
I
so
know.
it's not worth me just belly aching about it on the air. But I don't get it.
I
don't
know.
get
It would be different if we did not
Give me the
know-
schedule.
we-
Tell me when they're playing.
Right.
I'll watch. I
would
don't
be-
watch the schedule come out.
It would be different if we did not know who the opponents were. If you found out who they were playing and when, that would be suspenseful, sort of like Selection Sunday, for example. But having already known, we've known who the Titans are going to play since the season ended. We've known the Titans' opponents since January or February. Now we just
Right.
know what order. So I don't understand all the hoopla, but NFL Network does a whole show of it. People are going to watch. But
I also don't get the big deal of what channel the games are on, or those are the other things that come out. Like, ooh, they're on prime time 4 times, or something like that. Like, ooh, I don't. Just
credit
let's
to the
just go with it.
NFL, though. The NFL has found out how to make itself a year-round league between the schedule itself, the games
Is it
itself.
the NFL or is it just footballs that we just love football that much?
It could be either one.
Is
I think it's a little bit of
Is it
both.
really the mastermind of the people that run the NFL, or is it just we're you can't screw up the fact that we just love football that much?
I do think that's part of it, but the season is over and we immediately transition to draft talk. Then you have the combine, then you have the draft, then you have the schedule release, then you have OTAs and training camp. So there's really never a gap. Maybe somewhere in the middle of the summer.
It never ceases to amaze me. I looked at you and I were going back and forth. What are some things we can talk about on the show X day, Y day? I looked at the stories of the NFL, and several teams had their rookie mini camp like the Titans did. And almost without a doubt, it's the first round pick or the quarterback stood out among the crowd, showed leadership skills, looked good on the first day. It's all about hope. It's all about excitement. And it's really insignificant.
Hope is
in
a
the
powerful
grand-
thing, man.
Yes, it
People
is.
love hope.
And I do think that's part of the draft. I do and the appeal of the draft. I do think that is part of the scheduling thing and the psyche of us, right? It's this, especially when you have a league, and this is to their credit, they were the first to come up with the concept, Pete Rozelle, of competitive balance with the parity, the scheduling, the way they have done it, to try to make sense that everybody has a chance. Everybody has hope. You can screw it up pretty quick, but when it's resets, you've got that same hope that brings you back.
I do want to point out, according to the NFL, I did see this, although the Titans' actual schedule has not been released in terms of who the Titans are playing each week and which day, all that stuff. The Titans have the 4th easiest schedule based on opponent win percentage at 450.
As they should.
The only teams with easier schedules, the Patriots at 429, the Saints at 419, and the Niners at 415. The hardest schedule, the New York Football Giants at 574. So we will see what
I'm sure
order.
the Giants are sitting there going, "How's that?" But I think it's because
You're playing the Eagles twice. You're playing the Commanders twice.
right, which didn't used to be the Commanders part of it.
Right.
That's scary sounding, but that is all of a sudden a pretty deep division.
Yes, and quickly, just the remaining international games. TBD opponent at Chargers in Brazil, Vikings at Steelers in Dublin, Vikings at Browns in London, Broncos at Jets in London, Rams at Jaguars in London, Falcons at Colts in Berlin, and Commanders at Dolphins in Madrid.
Are there going to be other clues revealed today? Like, are they dropping other tidbits between now and
I don't
Friday?
know.
Don't they usually
It's like
do
a
that?
scavenger hunt.
Don't they usually do that? They drop in, hey, we found out another game. Like maybe it'll Adam Schefter will speculate.
We'll see.
Doesn't that usually happen?
I think so. I try again.
Let's see if during the show. I want to know if there's a Charger fan right now in LA refreshing his computer. Who is our opponent in Brazil? I've got to know. We got to win that game.
Dylan on our text line says, all I want to know is when and where the Titans will play the Patriots. That will be great television. Dylan in Antioch. Adam in Portland says, Adam, you left out free agency, which is true. The only thing they missed the mark on is the Pro Bowl. If they made that competitive again, they would rule the world. The NFL already has a stranglehold on our imaginations. But yes, if the Pro Bowl could become watchable again, that would be great. By the way, the Titans will play the Patriots at Nissan Stadium. That's already been determined. So Mike Vrabel will be here during the regular season. We just don't know which week. 615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Coming up next, as we mentioned, the NBA draft lottery was last night. The Mavericks had a less than 2% chance of winning the lottery. They won the lottery. So draft lotteries, good or bad? Willie and I will discuss that in depth coming up next. You can join us as well. 615-737-1025. Tune in to 94.9 The Fan tonight as the Nashville Sounds take on Memphis. Pregame begins at 6:30 p.m. and the first pitch is at 6:45. Coverage is also available on the Game Nashville app and at thegamenashville.com. Sounds Baseball on 94.9 The Fan is presented by Twin Peaks and Family Leisure.
I need to know word for word. I need to know word for word the prayer or spell that Nico Harrison spoke out loud and spoke this into existence. How did he pull this off? He is somehow blessed and highly favored after being the #1 villain in the NBA. I cannot believe that Nico Harrison found himself in this position.
You know what I love about this? What I absolutely love about this? The teams that set out to tank this year, Utah, Washington, Charlotte, didn't get rewarded. This is now the second team in the last two drafts
10 and 11
to win the draft lottery that started out outside of the top 9. Like the Atlanta Falcons last year won the lottery. They had the 10th best odds. The Atlanta Hawks. Atlanta Hawks started out, they had the 10th best odds. They won the lottery. Dallas Mavericks had the 11th best odds. They won the lottery. Like the NBA set out a couple of years ago to flatten the odds when it came to winning the draft lottery. They've done that now. And this is taking away the incentive of teams that are going through the organizational tank. And I say this all the time. Players don't tank, but organizations do tank. Teams are going to have to start thinking twice about setting out to tank a season. When you decide you're going to trade away a player that is an asset, now all of a sudden it's not just about getting draft picks in return. It's about trying to get viable players that fit the timeline that you're trying to build in order to get a playoff contender. I think this is a win for the NBA as a whole. If you're Adam Silver, you're sitting here looking at it today and telling teams, this is why you don't want to tank.
That was the unsportsmanlike crew on ESPN Radio discussing the NBA draft lottery last night. Willie Daunic, Adam Vingan here with you again. The Dallas Mavericks, who won the draft lottery, had just a 1.8% chance to win it and jumped 10 spots to grab the top pick, the biggest move by any team in lottery history, according to ESPN. Was the NHL draft lottery last week?
Yes.
Oh, wow. It feels like it was so much longer than that. The NHL draft lottery last Monday, the New York Islanders had 3.5% odds to jump up to #1, and they did. By the way, also according to ESPN, the Islanders' jump from 10th to 1st is the biggest involving a team winning the #1 selection. So that's 2 draft lotteries in 2 weeks where teams that had very little chance of winning the lottery ultimately prevailed. And it's led to a lot of questions, of course, about whether the draft lottery is rigged. Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated, who is an incredibly intelligent individual, tweeted this. Wow, one of the dumbest trades in sports history is rewarded with the rights to Cooper Flagg. Charles Robinson, who joins Robbie and Rexford every week, tweeted, the NBA draft lottery is just a system that punishes fan bases and opens up a lane to subvert parity. Happy for the Mavericks fan base after that horrific Luka trade, but this lottery system does nothing but stick it to fans of bad teams. And I do want to make one thing clear, Willie, specifically about the NHL draft lottery. First of all, the NHL held the lottery right in front of us. They made a point. For the first time in its history, the ping pong balls were plucked out of that weird contraption right in front of us. And also, some of you Predators fans who felt scorned about what happened last week to the Predators, it's rigged for New York. There's a difference. And Willie, you can attest to this as well. There's a difference between Midtown, Manhattan, Madison Square Garden, and New York, Long Island. There's a little bit of a difference between New York and New York. So
this is true.
as the son of New Yorkers with families on Long Island.
Yeah, it's a little different. There's a lot of people who live on Long Island.
Absolutely.
Like millions, but still.
But it's New York and New York. It's a little bit different. But with the Dallas Mavericks, look, Nico Harrison, the Mavericks GM, made a trade that it was so astounding. People still don't believe it actually happened. One of my favorite stories from the immediate aftermath of that trade was Shams Charania, who's the NBA insider for ESPN, tweeted the details, and a few of his colleagues thought he was hacked. So they texted him and said, "Did you actually tweet this? This is real, right?" Like, that's how flabbergasted everybody was. So people feel like, hey, Nico Harrison, straight from the NBA. Here's your mulligan, pal. Here's Cooper Flagg. I know it seems so convenient. I'm not a conspiracy theorist in general, so I'm not going to go there with this one. But it's led to a lot of questions about draft lotteries and whether, Willie, it's the right system for these leagues that do it.
It does have you lament. And I before the NHL lottery, I talked about the fact that Nashville, every single time they've been in any semblance of the lottery, they've had the worst outcome possible. Every time. And they haven't been in it very, very often, which is a good thing. It's a tribute to the fact that they've been a pretty consistent winning franchise since the beginning, since they got over the hump of the expansion age, the first 5 years or so. And even when they were in the expansion age, unfortunately for them, they didn't lose enough games to get the high pick, which in retrospect, maybe that wasn't the greatest thing, even though it built a really good foundation of how they wanted to play. But then it's easy to just roll your eyes and say, look, the basketball gods or whatever should not reward a team that made a really bad trade and then wins the lottery with a 1.8% chance. As a Predator fan, you're sitting there going, you're never bad. You have a chance to get the first pick and you move down to 5th. And then over here, the Mavericks did something completely stupid. They had a 1.8 chance and they win. Woe is me. I get that. There's tons of fan bases around the country that are seeing that and having that. The question for me is not conspiracy or anything like that. It's, should the Mavericks have had any chance to get the first pick? Because they weren't in the category of a team that should be in the pool of teams, in my opinion, that would have a chance for the first pick. I think there should be a little better system of who has a chance to get the first overall pick.
To your point, here are some notes about the NBA draft lottery according to CBS Sports. The team with the worst record has not picked number 1 once since 2019. And the reason 2019 is an important date is that the NBA changed the odds starting with the 2019 draft. Prior to the 2019 draft, the worst team in the league had a 25% chance of winning the lottery. The second worst team had a 19.9% chance of winning the lottery. And the third worst team had a 15.6% chance of winning the lottery. Over the past several years, the 3 worst regular season teams each have the same percent chance of winning. They each have a 14% chance of winning. That was what Chris Canty was talking about in the clip that we played. So the NBA leveled the odds at the top of the draft. But the Mavericks, as you mentioned, Willie, the past 2 teams to win the draft lottery, the Mavericks and the Hawks, were in the play-in tournament. They did not reach the actual postseason, but they were in the play-in tournament. So the question is, should the NBA, for example, eliminate play-in teams from being eligible for the draft lottery and give those odds to the teams that actually deserve them?
Or should they be more like the NHL, where you can move up a bunch, but you can't get the first pick? You can move up a maximum of 10 spots. That's what happened with Utah in the NHL draft. They moved up 10 spots to get the 4th pick, and that bumped, among other teams, Nashville down. But Utah, because of where they finished, they would have finished right around where the Mavericks and Hawks finished. Not bad, but in the middle and out of the playoffs. So in the NHL's rules, if they won the lottery, which they did on some level, they could move up 10 spots, but they couldn't move all the way to number 1. I think that's a good compromise. There's things I like about both of them. I don't know that there's an ideal way of doing it. It all is predicated, right, on they don't want teams to tank. This is one thing that was kicked around when baseball was starting their process of coming up with their rules for the lottery. Yes, baseball has a lottery now, even though it's not talked about very much because rarely does anybody go from the draft right to the major leagues. It's kind of like, oh, my team drafted so-and-so, great. I'll see that guy in a couple of years or whatever. I'll worry about it when he gets there. There's not as much fanfare for the baseball draft. Usually, if you're a Major League Baseball fan, you don't follow college baseball. But there were some, because of the tanking thing. Remember, the Astros tanked for a few years and picked very high in the first round. Most people thought on purpose, and then built a really good team that even to this day still has players from that era that they drafted way back when because they were bad. They didn't hit on everybody, but they did pretty well. So there was an argument saying you should fight, you should earn the right to pick high by winning. And the opposite of the tank where you lose and you automatically pick high. That's baseball had no lottery for a long time, so the worst team got the first pick, no questions asked. But should you have some sort of competition? In other words, you fight with the other teams that are going to be out of the playoffs, and the highest team that finishes there has the best odds, not the lowest team. That would prevent tanking,
That's
right?
an interesting thing you bring up because there is one professional league that does something like that, and I want to discuss that coming up next. But other notes from the NBA draft lottery. Again, the team with the worst record has not picked number one once since 2019. The team with the worst record has now fallen to number 5 3 years in a row.
Wow.
Of the 28 top 4 picks handed out since 2019, more than half, 15, have gone to teams starting in the 5th slot or later. Of those same 28 top 4 picks given since 2019, 7 have gone to teams starting in the 8th slot or later, so the second half of the lottery. Play-in tournament teams have now won consecutive lotteries as both the Mavericks and Hawks reach the postseason, but not the playoffs.
I think it's a huge thing in the NBA, too, because of the difference that one player can make, right? I think one player makes a bigger difference in that sport than any of the other sports that we've talked about. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
I mean, Cooper Flagg is going to swing things for the Mavericks quite a bit,
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit more than the 8th or the 10th or the 12th pick would have, probably, right? We never know, but I think we have a better sense of that in basketball. So the rules are that much more important, whereas it's a little bit more of a crapshoot in the baseball and the hockey drafts. And, of course, football hasn't felt the need to even have a lottery.
615-737-1025. Where do you stand on the draft lottery system? If it were up to you, how would you award the number 1 pick in a draft? Should it be like the NFL? Worst team gets the first pick, or should there be more to it? You let us know. 615-737-1025. Also, I want you to be listening at the end of the next segment because I do have a giveaway. But before we get there, Nashville's best deal of the week is Bavarian Beer House, conveniently located at Opry Mills Mall. Enjoy beer, food, music, and fun at Nashville's only authentic German beer hall, where it's Oktoberfest every day. Head to thegamenashville.com/deals now to get a $50 gift card for only $25 to Bavarian Beer House while supplies last. D. Mace Finnegan and Donick 1025, 1063 the game. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan talking draft lotteries. Let's bring in Kenny the mailman on our phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Kenny, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Good morning, one and all. First of all, Willie, I celebrate the graduations and victories in the Donick family. The way I look at it, I've been listening to you so long. You're just a wonderful part of my radio family. So we celebrate with you.
Well, thank you, Kenny. I appreciate that.
There are a lot of good things going on. We keep up with it.
All right. Thank you.
What I wanted to say is I'm not impressed a lot with a lot of the owners of these clubs. Just, you heard on the clip where some people were calling the GM of the Dallas Mavericks a villain, the biggest villain in the NBA. He traded this and that. Trades like that, the owners have to approve, or they would have thrown the GMs out of a window 5 minutes after they made it. We've never heard the reason why the owner wanted to do that. We've never heard the owner here talk about the Brown trade. And I'm sure she was taken aside and said, look, if you want this done, we can do this, this, and this. So I think a lot of this goes back to owners. It's sort of murky. They won't clear up what they've done, and people want to blame GMs and this and that. So sometimes you do what you're told and you sort of smile so you can keep your paycheck. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you, Kenny.
Thanks for the call, Kenny. It's hard to know. I'm sure there's instances of what he's talking about where the owner orchestrates. I mean, the famous one here is VY is my guy, where Bud Adams basically told Floyd Reese and Jeff Fisher, this is who you're drafting, Vince Young. So you tell me. I know there's a lot of people throwing out the conspiracy stuff. I don't know of course, Mark Cuban is not the owner of the Mavericks anymore.
The Adelson family,
I
believe, owns the majority of the.
So
Dallas
I don't know what was going on. I don't know enough about the Mavericks.
Neither do I.
As to why that trade happened and all of that. I know how poorly it was received and how that guy was mocked, daily.
Yes.
And now he gets retribution or just this unbelievable stroke of luck to win the lottery, which a lot of people are very skeptical of. I don't see how it all adds up though. Right.
Yeah, I don't know the inner workings of the Dallas Mavericks, but
why would the NBA want to do them a solid by, hey, you made this bad trade, but hey, let me do you a solid. This new ownership group that's only been
unless you want to put your tinfoil hat on and say that the NBA worked behind the scenes to get the Mavericks to trade Luka Doncic to Los Angeles and said, for your troubles, we will reward you with the number 1 overall pick so you can start over.
I see. I also did hear that Cooper Flagg did not really want to play for Utah.
I don't know much about Salt Lake City.
I don't know either. I don't know why that would be. I mean, I think they've got great fans and everything like that.
Is it a Mormon thing?
No, I don't think so.
Who knows?
There was another team that I heard he didn't want to play for. This is all speculation and all that stuff. But
well, I will be repping Cooper Flagg wherever he goes.
I think Cooper Flagg is going to be really, really good in the pros right away.
I'm intrigued by his fit in Dallas, but there is one potential solution for the way that teams orchestrate the draft. And it was implemented by the PWHL, the Professional Women's Hockey League. It's called the Gold Plan. And the Gold Plan was proposed in the late 2000s by statistician Adam Gold. Here are the rules of the Gold Plan, according to the PWHL. The PWHL. Once a team is mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, it begins earning draft order points in all subsequent games, including all regular season games that begin following a team's elimination. Using the league's standard point system that awards 3 points for a regulation win, 2 points for an overtime or shootout win, 1 point for an overtime or shootout loss, and 0 points for a regulation loss. The team with the most draft order points at the conclusion of the regular season will earn the first selection in each round of the draft. The non-playoff team with the fewest draft order points will select second in each round of the draft. So that is to incentivize teams who are out of the running for the playoffs to continue to play and not throw every game, because you collect points that could help you attain the number 1 overall pick. And there are plenty of people who wish that the NHL would adopt this. And Willie, as we were talking during the break, you were talking about one of the potential pitfalls.
Well, one of the questions would be, and I think I know why they put it in there, and I think there's some merit to this. This was talked about in baseball, and I don't think they ended up doing it. They didn't, as far as I know. But let's say you're eliminated. They use the Blackhawks, right? Do you have the numbers on the Blackhawks
Yes.
this past? So if the NHL were to have done this,
This was I believe this was entering the final week of the regular season. So it's not the official total, the final total, but this is on The Athletic, by the way, by Sean McIndoe, also known as Down Goes Brown, because he keeps track of this stuff. So this was entering the final week of the regular season. So the Blackhawks were eliminated from postseason contention on March 20th. For context, the Predators were eliminated from postseason contention a week later, according to this, on March 27th. So the Blackhawks at that time, since being eliminated, had played 11 games versus the Seattle Kraken, for example, who were eliminated from postseason contention on March 29th, who had played 7 games. But at the time of this tally, they both had 8 points after elimination. So your point is, what if a team that gets eliminated a week and a half later goes on a run and beats the team that has the worst team in the league, right? Basically, is how you were describing it.
more or less, yeah, because it does bring to mind, how tough is the team's schedule down the stretch? How do you compare that? I like the idea, though, that on the last day of the season, there's an incentive to win and not, hey, we kind of like to lose this game. Because that's what happened in the NFL, where the Titans, imagine if they needed to win, if they really needed to win by that principle, they had been eliminated and they would have been incentivized to win that game against Houston. How different that game might have been. And the same thing would have applied in New England or wherever that game was. The Bills Patriots
game was in New England, yes.
Where Joe Milton famously
Yes.
pulls the upset.
Yes.
Against a Bills team that really didn't want to win, didn't care that they won. They were resting guys for a different reason. But that's what got the Titans the first pick in the draft, right?
So Sean,
seems like in a perfect world, you want teams to try to win all the way to the end, right?
So Sean McIndoe writes at The Athletic, one of the arguments against the idea of the gold plan has been what happens if the conferences are so unbalanced that one side gets eliminated way earlier than the others. And the answer was always the odds of that happening in a meaningful way are small enough to essentially ignore. Oops, it did happen this year in the NHL, thanks to an Eastern wildcard race so tepid that it means all of the conference's worst teams couldn't pass the elimination mark until the season was nearly over. Meanwhile, the West's worst teams were happily banking gold plan points for weeks, even though their overall records weren't much worse than the East.
Right. So in other words, the Sharks, the Blackhawks, the Predators, they were among the first teams eliminated, whereas the East, because the wild card team total for the last wild card was a lot lower, it kept mathematically the possibility that teams like the Islanders and a bunch of mediocre teams stayed in the mix, and the Islanders benefited from that because they were in the lottery and they won it.
So, for example, the Sharks, at the time of this story, the Sharks were eliminated on March 16th. They played 12 games at that point. They had 6 points. The Flyers were eliminated on April 5th. They had played 3 games. They had 5 points.
Yeah, I guess the thinking is it just the really, really bad teams, it gives them something to kind of keep trying to win and not tank, not just, bring up minor leaguers, have guys hurt, shut it down. It gives you a reason to continue to try to earn the right to pick high. So I think that has merit. There are flaws in it for sure. Like if you have 11, if we're essentially the same level of team, we're both bad. You play in the East, I play in the West, but you have 11 games to earn the gold points, and I only have 7 games to earn gold points. Something's not right about that, especially if, like Down Grows Brown points out, that it's the imbalance of the conference that deems that we're still that I'm mathematically alive and you're not. That's a flaw for sure. There's flaws no matter what you do in the lottery. I guess the next question is, should the NFL have a lottery?
That's a good question.
Titans fans are pretty glad they don't. right now?
Why don't you answer that question at 615-737-1025? We'll continue to take your thoughts on the state of draft lotteries around professional sports. But coming up next, there was a sudden retirement in the NFL over the weekend, and there's a lot of fallout from that, and we want to discuss that coming up next. 615-737-1025. I did, however, promise a giveaway, so that's what we're going to do right now. Be caller number 2 at 615-737-1025, and you will win a pair of tickets to see Lil Baby at Bridgestone Arena on Sunday, June 8th. That's caller number 2, 615-737-1025. You will win a pair of tickets to see Lil Baby at Bridgestone Arena on Sunday, June 8th. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, The Game.
All right, time to tell you about F&M Bank, banking made easy on purpose. We are continuing to take it to the bank every Friday at 1:45. We'll be back on with that when we are reunited in DVD with D Mace coming up this week. And F&M Bank continues to do great work across our listening area in their 20 locations. You can go to myfmbank.com to find the nearest location to you. And this is what you want. This is why you want to get in there and take a look at it, because they do great work. Banking made easy on purpose. That's their motto. Everything revolves around that. Their programs for you to make your financial life easier. If you're a business owner, they've got great plans, especially small businesses. Your business means more to them. They want your phone call. They want your business. Go to their website, myfmbank.com. Find the nearest location to you. They're right in the middle of your community. West End Avenue in Nashville, 6 locations in Clarksville, Hopkinsville, Kentucky, Mount Juliet, Murfreesboro, Springfield. They're all there, and they want to hear from you. Banking made easy on purpose. myfmbank.com. We'll take it to the bank Friday at 1:45. It's F&M Bank. Banking made easy on purpose. Member FDIC.
D-Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. And we are presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, David Janes here with you until noon. Then Chase and Big Joe from noon to 3. Jake Lyman and Derek Mason from 3 to 6. And we're kind of switching things up again tomorrow. I'm going to be on with Robbie tomorrow from 6 to 9 a.m. at the crack of dawn with my friends Robbie Stanley and Ian Safar. And you'll be with Derek Mason tomorrow. I can't remember which time.
12 to 3.
12 to 3.
We're 12
Okay.
to 3. Yeah. I gotta make sure I get on this. Gotta make sure I got my stuff straight.
What I can't wait for
Are
is
you ready for the early wake up call?
I mean, I was up at 4:45 this morning.
Okay,
because
so not a big deal.
my dog was kicking me in the back. So I was up at 4:45 this morning, which is around the time I'm going to wake up tomorrow to come in here bright and early with Robbie and Ian. By the way, I'm looking forward to tomorrow's Stillman and Company, starring Joe Rexroad and Paul Kaharski.
The bash Jared off.
Oh man, that's phrasing, David Janes, phrasing, my friend. But let's he knows what he did. He knows what
I
he
knew
did.
exactly what I was doing.
He knows what he did. So there was a sudden retirement in the NFL over the weekend. And of course, I had interest in this as I am a fan of the team. Derek Carr retired from the NFL. He had some major shoulder issues, which ultimately led him to deciding to hang up the cleats after I would call a solid career. He had a lot of turnover, a lot of different coaches, a lot of different offensive coordinators. He was a solid pro, I would say, over the course of his career. But it does change the dynamic for the New Orleans Saints. Of course, from a cap perspective, I have to whisper that on this station sometimes. But also the makeup of the Saints quarterback room. It's an interesting mix, Willie Donick. You have Tyler Shuck, the second-round pick in this year's draft, number 40 overall. You have Spencer Rattler, who was a fifth-round pick in 2024, who went 0-6 as a starter last season in place of an injured Carr, and Jake Haener, who was a 2023 fourth-round pick. So not a lot of experience in that section of the Saints locker room, but the Derek Carr retirement sent ripples through the NFL. You know, as a Saints fan, you know, you never want to wish poorly upon somebody, but it might be a blessing in disguise, you know, to get rid of the contract as much as you can. You know, the NFL salary cap, I should say, is incredibly complex to me, but a really interesting ripple effect from this decision by Derek Carr.
Well, can you help me fill in a little bit the basics of the salary cap ramifications of his retiring when he did? Because isn't there one theory that he is going to retire and then heal up and then somewhere down the road come out of retirement to a team that desperately needs a quarterback?
So this is according to NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune,
Yes.
which is a fantastic name for a newspaper. Carr's retirement is expected to be processed after June 1st. The transaction will clear Carr's base salary off the books for the 2026 season, clearing a $30 million commitment next season and dropping his cap hit by nearly half. New Orleans had already restructured Carr's contract this offseason, converting all but the minimum salary to signing bonus and lowering his 2025 cap hit by nearly $31 million. Because that money has already been allocated for this season, there will be minimal changes to Carr's 2025 cap hit.
Right. So they paid him.
Yes.
So there's a benefit for the Saints cap-wise to his retiring, right?
Yes.
And for Carr, in theory, because he's retiring because he's hurt, right? That's what he's telling you?
Yes. So the Saints said that Carr experienced pain in his right shoulder in late March after his first significant throwing session of the offseason. The Saints said scans determined Carr had a labral tear and quote-unquote significant degenerative changes to his rotator cuff.
Ugh.
According to the team, surgery was an option, but that would have put his 2025 season in jeopardy, with a possibility that Carr would never return to his previous level of strength and function.
Okay. I guess there's still maybe a conspiracy theory, not to bring up that word again, but that Carr could reemerge after training camp, maybe even in October, maybe even November, where he's like, hey, my arm feels pretty good. And some team out there needs a quarterback, and he could come in for a song and be available off the street. Remember,
Like
there's been
Aaron
some,
Rodgers for
well, Aaron Rodgers, of course, plays this game every year, but I think Ryan Tannehill would be the one
Mhm.
that, remember, he didn't retire, right? Ryan Tannehill was a free agent and just basically said, I'll think about it. Call me if you're interested, and I'll decide, am I interested in you? But that's basically where Carr is now, right? I don't know if it's said publicly that that's what he might do.
I don't
Right
think he
now
has
it's
said
just
that
retiring.
publicly.
Right.
Right.
But let's put that aside for a second, because the Saints have been, how would you categorize that? In the post-Drew Brees, they've been pretty mediocre, right? Never so bad to get a high pick and not really a playoff team.
They have been wandering the quarterback wasteland ever since Drew Brees left the game. You've had Andy Dalton at quarterback. You've had Jameis Winston at quarterback. Taysom Hill, Joe Rexrode's favorite player, even started some games at quarterback. Trevor Siemian started a game or two at quarterback for the Saints, including a game in Nashville a few years ago. It's been bad, man. It's been bad. But,
okay.
But yes, they have not been bad enough to benefit from the NFL's lack of a draft lottery system.
I think a lot of people like me, right at first, were like, why didn't David Carr just tell them before the draft that, look, I got to do the right thing here. I don't think I can throw. I don't think I can play. Would it help you if I retired now? I just want to let you know this so that you can draft accordingly.
Since Drew Brees left New Orleans, the Saints have gone 9-8, 7-10, 9-8, and 5-12.
There you go. So mediocre.
Yes.
But why didn't this get addressed before the draft?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer to that.
So the bottom line is they are where they are now, and they're in a really tough position because you just named the quarterbacks that they have, and that's who they're going to have to roll with, for better or worse.
Again, unless we've been awaiting the announcement from the Pittsburgh Steelers that they're signing Aaron Rodgers. Maybe New Orleans is an opportunity now. Maybe.
Is that what you would want?
As a fan, no.
Okay. Well, I was actually listening to the MMQB podcast with Connor Orr and Albert Breer, and they were discussing this, and they concluded that this might be the best thing for the Saints is to bottom out and get a high first-round pick, whether that's number 1, number 2, number 5. But that's where maybe they're going because they've been playing the move money around salary cap game, rob Peter to pay Paul to stay somewhat competitive, and it hasn't really worked for the last 5 seasons or so. So wouldn't maybe that be the best thing? Because they have not had a top 3 pick since the Vince Young draft, 2006, or is it the year after Vince Young? 2006 is the last time they had a top 3 pick,
and it was Reggie Bush.
Am I remembering that right?
Yes,
it
was Mario Williams went number 1, Bush 2, Vince Young 3.
Vince Young 3, Bush was 2. Okay,
Bush
so
was 2.
That's what I was.
Williams, Bush, and Young were the top 3 in 2000.
Okay, so that was the VY. No, that was a long time ago. That's the last time they picked because Drew Brees had them winning so consistently for so long.
Indeed.
So, who else is possibly coming out in the draft next year? Possibly. He's eligible at quarterback.
Let me guess.
Has New Orleans ties.
It would give the citizens of New Orleans all the fuzzies, all the warm and fuzzies, if a Manning put on a New Orleans Saints uniform again.
Yes. Now, Arch Manning would be eligible for the draft next year.
Who knows if he'll actually come out?
Well, that's
the Mannings like to stay in school, as I understand.
And this was a very astute point made by Orr and Breer. Is historically, or at least in recent history, college quarterbacks who play 25 or more games, start 25 or more games, tend to have a better success rate are more ready to transition to the NFL than those who have less. And there's many examples. That doesn't always stay true to form, but by and large, that's been the case. And as you just mentioned, the Mannings have been very patient. Peyton Manning famously came back to school for his senior year when he easily could have come out and been a high first-round pick, if not the first pick, the year before he actually came out. Eli Manning played a lot of college football before he came out, and he was the first pick in the draft as well. So it stands to reason that you better be prepared. If you're going to tank this year, there's that word again. We just talked about lotteries last year. That if you're tanking for Arch Manning, you have to be prepared for the fact that he may not come into the draft because he started, 2 games in college right now? And they were kind of scrub games that they were heavily favored and they were going to win easy. You and I could have maybe quarterbacked. Well, maybe not.
Don't give me too much credit.
Maybe not. But a replacement level college quarterback with Texas's roster probably would have won both of the games that Manning did. But that being said, he looks like he's got some special tools. That will be a story to follow all year, next year in the SEC, when Arch Manning takes over finally after all the hoopla and is Texas's starting quarterback. But it's a great dream that a lot of New Orleans people are saying is, hey, we could pick for Arch Manning. But you would almost maybe have to be bad for 2 years.
Yes.
But who have we been talking about? What team have we been talking about around here that we think it's going to take more than 1 year to fix all of the problems? I think it starts with a T, the Tennessee Titans, because I think that's a really intriguing team to watch now. New Orleans is forced to close the window on whatever they've been trying to do, which I don't know what you think about the job they've done. Sometimes it's better just to bottom out. And it's hard to do it when you're in the market.
They're old.
And you've got fans that are like, what, you could still win.
Right.
It's the NFC South. It's a terrible division. You can win that division.
Alvin Kamara.
Just like you're the AFC South.
And
all you got to do is beat the Jaguars and the Texans. You can win.
no,
And you're reluctant. You can be competitive.
Alvin Kamara and Cam Jordan, they're grandpas effectively at the NFL, in terms of NFL age. It's like we were talking about draft lotteries earlier. And this is sort of the inner conflict I have. Like, I don't love the idea of outright tanking, like knowing your team is doing it. But I also believe, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the Stanley Cup playoffs later in the show, that you can only get better if you allow yourself to get worse at some point. I think that is a necessary evil in these sports, that there are exceptions, but I do believe that you have to take that step back in order to take 2 steps forward. So if this is what forces the Saints to finally do that, I'm on board with it. I just, part of me is like, I don't love the idea of my team like going out there and know it, like the trust the process era Philadelphia 76ers. It's like, I don't want to watch a team that I know is tanking. Like, if it's wink tanking, that's one thing.
That's the hardest part of it.
Yes. So that's the difficult part. One texter says, if Arch Manning did come out next year, would Archie pull another Eli/Chargers/Giants deal again? I don't know the allure of New Orleans for the Manning family.
But the intriguing thing would be, let's say New Orleans had the 3rd or the 4th pick, but there's a lot of sentiment from the Manning family that, hey, we've orchestrated some drafts before. How do we get him to New Orleans? That your conspiracy theories would be running rampant, right? That's what he's getting at.
Jeff on our text line says, if Cam Ward does not play up to his assigned potential and Carr has successful shoulder surgery and wants back in the game, what are the odds the bargain bin shopping Titans will have him looking for a realtor in Nashville?
Let's hope it doesn't get to that. But I would think Carr would only be interested in a place where maybe he could jump on and help a team get into the playoffs, right?
So we've used the analogy of the bin
You're
before,
not gonna,
right?
Right. You're not going to come out of the bin to a bad team.
Derek Carr is that,
or you're not going to go into a bin where a bad team could pick you out of the bin.
Derek Carr is that DVD in the bin where the jacket's a little torn. Maybe there's a scratch on the disc that prevents you from watching the special features. Like, it's still good. You'll still be able to watch the movie. It may just not be how you remember it because a scene
Right.
might skip.
Right. And that's a bad feeling when you want to watch the special feature and it doesn't go.
No. Remember special features, kids? Remember DVDs? Kids don't know,
Man.
whatever. 615-737-1025. Your thoughts on the Derek Carr situation and the ripple effect it will have. But I heard Jake and Derek talking about another potential situation coming out of the Derek Carr retirement, which relates to the Tennessee Titans. And we'll discuss that next. 615-737-1025. The 615 Open Charity Golf Tournament benefiting Folds of Honor presented by Gary Force Acura at Hermitage Golf Course is on Thursday, May 29th. Sign up to play or sponsor at 615open.com.
So the Saints knew there was a possibility that Derek Carr wouldn't play in 2025. Like as he was dealing with the shoulder injuries, he kind of got on this offseason. He tried to rehab. He took a shot, tried to get to a point where he could function. And it became pretty clear that without surgery, which he now needs, which he would need, without surgery, he was not going to be 100%, was not going to be able to play. What we didn't know, and what the Saints probably only learned recently, was that he was willing to not just work with them, but really like gave up a lot. Like retirement, look, best case option, he played. That's not going to happen. Second best option is he retires and he gave up $30 million that were previously guaranteed to him. Like he gave it up. He takes his $10 million in a roster bonus and he gives up 30. That means nothing this year, but next year his cap hit drops by 30 million. That kind of gets them back toward more like a regular salary cap team, I guess, and does them like a huge solid. So that, like, if you want to be like, you know, compromise, like that's a compromise. And that I thought Derek Carr didn't need to do that. I'm not sure a lot of people would have done that. I thought that was pretty cool. And yeah, I would say it gives Tyler Shough the kind of the inside track. You know, he's got to prove it. But you know, he was considered to be the most NFL ready starter in the group. We'll see now. He's got a good opportunity.
That was Ian Rappaport on the Pat McAfee show discussing Derek Carr's sudden retirement from the NFL over the weekend. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan here with you. So as Ian Rappaport mentioned, Tyler Shough, a second-round pick in this draft, number 40 overall, may have the inside track to be the Saints starting quarterback. So I have a trivia question for you, Willie Donick, and I want all of you to participate as well, 615-737-1025. Maybe I won't share the answer until the end of the segment to give you wonderful listeners an opportunity to chime in. Should Tyler Shough win the Saints starting quarterback job, he would be the first rookie quarterback selected outside of the first round to start his first career game since whom?
All right, I have a couple educated guesses here.
Okay. I will not reveal the answer until the end of the segment. So you can share your answers and you can text us your answers at 615-737-1025. Again, should Tyler Shough win the Saints starting quarterback job, he would be the first rookie quarterback selected outside of the first round to start his first career game since whom?
In other words, the opening day starter.
Yes.
You win the job as a non-first round pick.
Correct.
At quarterback,
which
is happening maybe out of necessity here. Unless I think Rattler could still beat him out, right? I mean, Rattler did play some. He wasn't awful.
He went
every
0-6
week
as a starter.
but that was a bad team.
Yes, it was.
And again, what's the big picture? Like the famous words by Mike Vrabel. Do you want my guess now?
Give me your guess.
I want to say Geno Smith.
Okay. I'm not going to reveal the answer until the end of the segment.
Okay. That would be my first
But
guess.
I want you guys to text
Geno
in as
Smith
well.
with the Jets.
Again,
way back when.
The trivia question of the segment. Should Tyler Shough win the Saints starting quarterback job, he would be the first rookie quarterback selected outside of the first round to start his first career game since whom? But go ahead.
Remember Mike Vrabel said over and over, I don't think you rebuild in the NFL. You don't rebuild. Even though there were a lot of people, I think and I'm trying to remember, I think this was more after they let go of John Robinson, where it appeared that Mike Vrabel was the guy spearheading everything in the direction of the Titans. And I think there were a lot of people saying, well, this is the time now to really start. And the real root of it is that they just had terrible drafts for 3 straight years. But Mike Vrabel was pushing back and saying, I don't think you rebuild in this league. You can't afford to rebuild in this league. And he, the next part of that, which I don't think he said, but is the inevitable, is you get fired. If you lose, you get fired. So you don't really get the time to rebuild a roster. But looking back on it, the Titans probably would have been better off starting the rebuild earlier. In hindsight's 2020. I can understand why they did what they did. But the Saints are being forced into this, right? This is the move that forces them to have to rebuild and maybe have to do this, start a non-first round draft pick at quarterback on opening day of his rookie year.
So I heard Jake and Derek touch on this briefly yesterday about whether Derek Carr's sudden retirement opens the door for a potential Will Levis trade, because we expected a Will Levis trade leading into the draft. It didn't happen at the draft. Mike Borgonzi said after the draft that they didn't even broach the subject, really, if I recall correctly. I don't see a fit there with the Saints. Again, they have a inexperienced quarterback group with a rookie quarterback in Tyler Shuck, Spencer Rattler, 6 career starts. Jay Kaner was a 4th-round pick in 2023. He's played in mop-up duty for the Saints over the past couple of years. But, you know, I still believe that despite the Titans continuously saying that they value Will Levis and that it's good to have him in the room and the competition and all that stuff, eventually a team is going to be in need of a quarterback. It's going to be similar to what we saw. My prediction is it's going to be similar to what we saw last year with Malik Willis. Malik Willis was traded basically at the end of training camp. I think it was the last week in August. It actually may have been my son's birthday, because I think I may remember seeing the tweet during my son's birthday party. But so it was late August when that happened. And that my prediction is if there is a Will Levis trade, it's going to happen at the end of training camp. Maybe he gets into a preseason game, shows out, has some good practices, and some team desperately needs a quarterback. I mean, the Steelers, who knows what's going on with the Steelers at quarterback? Here is their quarterback roster. Mason Rudolph. You all remember Mason Rudolph, right? Will Howard and Skylar Thompson. Now, maybe the Steelers don't want to sign up for the Mason Rudolph, Will Levis experience because that went so swimmingly here last season. But I'm wondering what other openings there could be that could manifest a Will Levis trade, perhaps.
That's a big one in Pittsburgh to wonder. And with the schedule coming out, this was another thing that was brought up in that NMQB podcast that I referenced earlier, is with the schedule makers, are they scheduling? The Steelers are always a great draw no matter what, because they have such an amazing fan base that spreads all across the country, really. But are they scheduling it with the idea that Aaron Rodgers is going to be their quarterback or Mason Rudolph? Because that would affect the ratings of a primetime game. Like if I'm the network, I'd like to know that. And you can't know that right now. But that's coming out on Friday, right? But what is the latest on Aaron Rodgers? And if you're the Steelers, do you really want to go down that road? A 42-year-old guy who hasn't played well in 3 years? That's a big gamble for sure. But as it relates to Will Levis, I still think right now, today, even with the Saints situation and to a lesser degree the Steelers, I don't think he has any trade value. If he did, I think they already would have traded him. Is it like I'm talking about zero trade value?
Well,
now that could change in training camp with injuries, because I would have said the same thing about Malik Willis. Zero trade value. And I was even surprised at the training camp that they got a 7th-round pick, which isn't a lot of value,
but it's something. I remember when we talked to Tim Hasselbeck after the draft. And by the way, we'll talk to Tim at 11 o'clock. And we talked about the Sam Howell trade that was made during the NFL draft from the Seahawks to the Vikings. It was basically a 5th-round pick swap for Sam Howell. And I asked him, do you think Will Levis would be worth more than that or less than that? And I thought Tim was going to say less than that. I believe Tim actually said he would have Will Levis valued more than Sam Howell.
I was surprised at Tim's answer there.
So it's a good question. I don't know what Will Levis's value is. Right now, it's probably not much. But if Sam Howell is worth a 5th-round pick, I think that Will Levis could be in that range. I don't see a fit in New Orleans. I think if they wanted to bring in another quarterback, it would need to be an experienced quarterback, like guy who's been around the block. Like I know that Tim.
But again, this would come back to the question,
right?
What's better for your franchise? That would be the Mike Vrabel answer. I got to get somebody in here who's experienced. I got to give it a shot. We're in the NFC South. We can win it.
Well, someone with experience could be Tim Boyle, who doesn't have a lot of playing experience, but has been around the league.
Yes,
that sort of experience.
But what is your goal? Is your goal to try to be, quote, competitive, or are you better off just not tanking, but just playing through it with the young quarterbacks and seeing what happens, seeing what you have? Exploratory was the term I used all of the offseason before they drafted Cam Ward, and build the rest of your roster, take the hit, the salary, eat the money that you've been compiling up on the credit card bill, the dead money that's been plaguing the franchise for the Saints for a long time, and move forward, that's a better pathway to getting back to where you want to be.
Are you ready for the answer?
So
Yes.
again, I'm
Sorry.
on the Will Levis part. If
Mhm.
I am a GM, I would say to myself, I'm not sure they're even going to keep Will Levis on the roster. So why would I trade them anything? I'll wait. If they cut him, then maybe I'll bring him on. I think that makes more sense than I'll trade you something for him right now. Unless you really think that much of him that you want him in there now for all of the offseason stuff. And I just don't think he's got that much value. I don't think he is in that category.
Are you ready for the answer to the trivia question?
I am.
So, according to ESPN, should Tyler Shuck win the job, he would be the first rookie quarterback selected outside of the first round to start his first career game since you said
I said
Geno Smith.
Jets.
David, do you have a guess?
Deshaun Kaiser?
Deshaun Kaiser. Congratulations, my friend. Deshaun Kaiser. Former Tennessee Titan Deshaun Kaiser. He did it in 2017 with the Cleveland Browns.
And what was the record of that Browns team?
Kaiser went 0 for 15
Pretty
as a
bad.
starter.
Yeah. that was didn't they go 0-16 that year?
Yes.
Perfection.
To the texter who said Dak Prescott,
I think they had a
believe
parade. I think they had a parade in Cleveland that year. Seriously, I think they had a parade when they completed the perfect season of 0-16 with Kaiser starting 15 of the 16. Did Geno Smith start his first game?
That's a
as
good
Jet?
question.
Because that was prior to 2017.
One texter said Dak Prescott, which I believe is accurate, but that was in 2016. Kaiser was in 2017.
Wow. Dak Prescott. I did not
Yes.
think about him. You're right.
Because Tony Romo got injured, if I recall correctly. But Dak Prescott, I think, would have qualified for that, but Deshaun Kaiser came after.
I was
Dak
even going
Prescott.
back. I was going back to the days of Gus Frerotte. Remember when he beat out? He was a lower pick, and Heath Schuler from the University of Tennessee, a great college quarterback, was drafted in the top 3 picks. But Gus Frerotte ended up being a way better NFL quarterback. Not that he was Joe Montana or anything like that, but he was solid, and Heath Schuler just never got it.
615-737-1025. Congratulations, David James. That's very impressive.
Well,
my
actually,
friend.
shout out to Ian. Ian helped me out with that.
All
as
right,
well.
Ian Safar. Hat tip to
What
Ian
do you mean?
Safar.
Quote helped you out.
Help!
Did you Google some things?
No,
Did you use AI.
I am not a Google person.
He's more of a Bing person.
Yeah, exactly.
Remember Bing?
What's Bing?
Microsoft's
Let's Bing it.
Microsoft's answer to Google was Bing.
Bing?
Yes.
Is
never
this like
took off.
Dave Bing from the Detroit Pistons?
Or Chandler
became
Bing, the
Chandler Bing?
the Vanderbilt recruit, Chandler Bing.
Bada Bing?
What was the name of the Microsoft iPod? The Zune. Remember the Zune? Nobody bought the Zune.
Oh, boy.
615-737-1025. There is a quarterback lurking in the shadows that I'm wondering about who could potentially be on the move. Ooh. Lurking in the shadows. Yes, there is. And we'll talk about them next. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063 The Game. D-Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 the game. Justin and Greenbrier on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. The Zune was the butt of a joke in the second Guardians of the Galaxy movie. It was given as a gift and said to be what everyone on Earth was using to listen to music. I don't think I ever met anybody who owned a Zune, which was the Microsoft version of the iPod.
I certainly did not.
I had a
I
cousin.
did have an
that had one.
iPod.
You had a cousin who had a Zune?
Yep. It was
Okay.
so funny.
I did have the same iPod for a long time. And there was a period of time where I was holding tight to the iPod. And
Me too, until mine broke.
Didn't put the all the music on my iPhone.
Yes.
I don't think I really knew how to do it. And it was weird. I was like, when I'm listening to music, I want my iPod, not my phone. I was that guy for a while. And then I left my iPod on the bus one time. That was dumb.
I dropped my iPod and cracked the screen while I was exercising, and I was very upset about it. There was some.
Does anybody still have an iPod
There was something
with song like your cherished songs from that day?
My dad.
There was something.
Still
Does it
does,
still
yep.
work?
Yeah, it still
Like-
works. Yeah.
Like I think it's kind of fun just because you can look back on what you put on the iPod
Yes.
in that era. It gives you a very specific year range of songs, just like when you open up an old shoebox, which I still have of all my old cassettes. I still have them all, like all the tapes I've got those.
There was something so satisfying about the
My
click,
CDs too.
about the click wheel on the iPod, just the way it felt and the click, 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 click,
Yeah,
click.
yeah.
Oh man,
You could get to
what is that called? ASMR? Is that what it's called?
Did you use your thumb when you used the circle thing?
Yes.
Or were you? Did people use the index finger?
I used my thumb.
Okay.
I feel like that would be one of those ASMR things, just the iPod click wheel sound, the click, 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 click. Oh, it's just so satisfying. Long live the days of the iPod.
Wasn't there a thing called Snooty?
I have no idea what that is.
iTunes backwards where you could put songs on there. Maybe somebody could help me out there. I remember the secret of Snooty one time. I think I used it.
That I don't know. But here's what I do know. There is a quarterback lurking in the shadows. Kirk Cousins. I'm wondering about Kirk Cousins in the quarterback carousel. He is still on the Falcons. We are all surprised by this, I think. ESPN wrote, rather than releasing him, the Falcons picked up a $10 million roster bonus for Cousins on March 15th, which will take effect in 2026. The team has made it clear that it won't just cut him without getting any compensation from another organization. Cousins, who has a no-trade clause, has made it known that he wants to be a starting quarterback in the NFL this coming season. He went as far as a phone meeting with owner Arthur Blank to plead his case for being released.
So he is trying to get released.
I'm imagining Kirk Cousins now doing all of these things at the Falcons facility to try to get fired.
Throw the ball into the lake.
Slashing the tires of the GM.
So if it was configured like the Titans practice facility, rather than the myth of the ball bounced into the water, he could actually throw it into the water, which would be so far off that maybe because this happens in some movies, right?
What?
People in high school intentionally flunking so they can stay in school, high school another year.
Yeah.
I think in
Wasn't that the premise of the movie Van Wilder? He never graduated.
maybe. I'm thinking of the Duckman in Pretty in Pink,
Yes.
intentionally flunking so he can stay in the same grade as the girl he's in love with, Molly Ringwald. I think in Stranger Things, which I'm trying to bow up on my Stranger Things because the new season's coming out pretty soon. Eddie, the guy that heads up the Dungeons and Dragons club, isn't he trying to finally graduate because he's been in high school forever? It's like a common theme.
I
think
never
this
got
is-
into Stranger Things.
Ooh, sorry about that.
I've got enough on my plate.
I feel like you should do that. I think you'd like it.
Why?
Adam, you give off liking Stranger Things. I feel like
I feel like you dig.
there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
But everybody
You
has
wouldn't be
shows
saying that if I
slip
didn't
through
have
the
big ass
cracks.
glasses. You wouldn't be saying that if I didn't. Wear
no,
these glasses.
I would.
Nerd. I hear you.
But
I'm
but Cousins,
yes.
it does. Like, how would you force a release? I have seen people do that. They just pout. Not a good team guy. You make it miserable. I've seen Ricky Henderson do that for any number of teams in baseball back in the day. God rest his soul, just passed away. But there have been plenty of pouters. NBA people have done it, right? where you just make life miserable on your team. Like, we got to get rid of this guy. He didn't want to be here. It happens in hockey too, right?
Mm-hmm. It does.
Mikko Rantanen just kind of did it, right? That was more of a business contract thing, but it just
Matthew Tkachuk didn't want to re-sign him with the Flames.
But I think he didn't do it during the season. He
Yeah,
did it
that
during
was
the
the
off
off-season.
season and said, "Look, I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm not going to re-sign here."
Mm-hmm.
That was more noble, I think.
What about the JT Miller, Elias Pettersson stuff that happened in Vancouver that led to Miller being traded? Does that count?
I don't know if I would put it in the same category as this,
Mm-hmm.
where you're trying to get released. You're trying to be so much of a
So what you're
thorn.
saying is that
But,
Kirk
but that's what
Cousins-
he's in the shadows. But he's in the shadows in the Falcons locker room, just trying to figure out how I get out of here.
Remember a few months ago when we read the story about the guy, the Yankees fan who interfered with Mookie Betts during the
Right.
World Series, and it was the "Where is he now?" type story, and he said that like someone sent animal poop to his mom's house or something, and Derek
Yeah,
looked up the website where you could
do that.
yeah. So maybe Kirk
And it
Cousins
did exist.
says maybe Kirk Cousins says I'd like to order a heap and helping of elephant poop, courtesy of Arthur Blank.
That's one thing you could do.
Or
Yes,
you could do
Derek
what,
did
James
verify
Harden-
that you could get on that website, that it did exist. And the first question on the questionnaire for him was, "What kind of bleep would you like?" And they had the categories.
Gino on our text line says, problem is Kirk Cousins doesn't have the character to do the things needed to get him fired, aka released. He seems too kind, maybe.
He does.
But I'm wondering about Cousins.
So, okay, so tell me where you're going with this, because where does he figure into the universe if he is out
well,
there
we
on the
mentioned
street?
we mentioned the Steelers. What if the Aaron Rodgers Pittsburgh Steelers marriage does not come to fruition, and the Steelers are like, "Are we really going to start Mason Rudolph at quarterback? Really? Why don't we go trade for Kirk Cousins?"
The shortage year in and year out of quarterbacks always leads us to these questions
Again,
at this time of the
We
year.
lived the Mason Rudolph experience. It wasn't a great experience. It was a boring experience. At least Will Levis, he went down in flames. Mason Rudolph playing quarterback.
Yes.
So the Steelers, I mean, look, Mason Rudolph had some success with the Steelers, but
Some.
some is the operative word. But I'm wondering about Cousins. I'm wondering if a team gets desperate enough to call the Falcons about Cousins.
Well, this goes back to, is he good enough to where you would actually trade something for him?
It doesn't appear that the Falcons are planning on cutting him. I think
They can say that,
yes.
but this is where the Cousins, how would you get out of it? How would you make life so miserable on them that they will just say, forget it?
I told you, send elephant poop to the owner. That's how I would.
That
do
would
it.
be a start. So that would be on the questionnaire. A, what type of bleep do you want? And B, who would you like to send the bleep to? Those were the first two questions that Derek pulled up when he pulled up the website.
Yes.
It's a simple process.
So I think Kirk Cousins is sort of a wild card in all of this when it comes to the quarterback situations around.
Okay,
the
so
league.
you're the Steelers. Would you rather have Cousins? If
Would
I'd
I
say
rather
rather
have
than
Kirk
Rodgers.
Cousins than Mason Rudolph? Yes.
Okay. So that would be, it just goes south with Rodgers, the soap opera,
Yes.
the baggage, all that comes with Rodgers.
You're not getting that.
Not
with Kirk
doing that.
Cousins.
Not doing that. So you would rather have Cousins than Mason Rudolph for
Wouldn't you-
1 year.
The Steelers do not appear to be
That's-
an organization
they're-
that's willing
they're
to
between
take
a
that
rock
step
and a
back.
hard place,
Yeah,
sir.
the Steelers are consistently in the playoff mix. They don't seem like an organization that's willing to take that big step back, at least not to my knowledge.
But you can argue that the Steelers are very close to being in the mediocre range, right?
I think they're there. Even when they make the playoffs, they're the 6th or 7th seed in the AFC,
and,
right?
And
And is it better to make the
I think there's
playoffs
something to be said for
from-
that.
okay.
Making the playoffs is legit, but at a point, there becomes a point where you're spinning your wheels and you're not getting anywhere. So what do? Like they've got some good aspects of their team. They just traded, I guess I would say, their most talented wide receiver, right?
George Pickens.
George Pickens. So what's best case, no matter who they start? And are they better off just taking a step back to take the steps forward? Are they at that point? I look at them a little bit like the Titans of a couple years ago. right? They're trying to figure out how do we keep it together and be good because we're not bad. It's like I think Mike Vrabel, the year that John Robinson got fired, I think they were at that point. They didn't have a lot of young people in the pipeline because of the poor drafts, and they thought they could still win the AFC South. And I guess this was after Robinson was fired, I guess. It was the first year of Rank Arthur, where they kind of said, let's give it one more go with Tannehill, with Byers, with Derrick Henry, and say, maybe we can still do it. I think the Steelers are at that crossroads.
615-737-1025. We can ask Tim Hasselback about that and other things related to the NFL, the quarterback position, and the Tennessee Titans. And we will do that next. Tim Hasselbeck from ESPN will join us. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason. I'm not Derek Mason. I'm Adam Vingan. See, bad habit. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan. Derek Mason will be on the 3 o'clock. 1025, 1063 the game. D-Mace Finnegan and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. And we are presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan joined on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com by ESPN NFL analyst Tim Hasselbeck. Tim, Willie and I spent much of the previous hour talking about Derek Carr's sudden retirement and the fallout of that, specifically for the New Orleans Saints. Tyler Shuck now has the inside track to start for the Saints, although Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener are there. What I'm curious for, we didn't talk a lot about Tyler Shuck with you just because he wasn't someone who was on the Titans' radar. But what are your thoughts on Tyler Shuck and how ready he could be to start for the Saints in Week 1 if it came to that?
Yeah, I loved him coming out. You know, his path was, you know, kind of unique. And I think because he was injured and so he bounced around and, you know, there was so much change for him. And some of it was just, you know, and I think that's the case with a lot of these guys now that are transferring their multiple spots. But like, you know, his seemed like it was transferring multiple spots. Like, why was he leaving? There were other guys that were replacing him that were good. You know, what was it? I will say, you know, I'd never called a Louisville game when he was there as Louisville's quarterback, but you know, talked to that coaching staff prior to the Senior Bowl, and you know, basically, and those guys have been around a lot of good quarterbacks, either their time in Purdue or time, you know, at Louisville, and you know, they basically were like, look, this guy is going to tear it up. Like, he's an NFL player, and the reason you say that is, he has the size, he has the arm strength, he has really good athleticism for a guy that is that size and has that arm strength. And, you know, I do think his pass was a little bit choppy, which, you know, probably impacted the way some people thought about him going into the draft process. But then once people got a chance to sit down and talk to him, see what he knew, and then also evaluate the physical side of things, he just was really, really impressive. So, I liked him a lot. I actually think that, you know, he's kind of going into this situation flying under the radar a little bit, and with him, you know, kind of flying under the radar and now walking in a situation where, look, he's going to be the day one starter. You know, I'm not sure what the expectations are, but they're probably not as high as they are for Cam Ward or as they are for Jackson Dart or they are for some of these other guys. I think he finds himself in a really good situation with an outstanding play caller as his head coach.
How should we remember Derek Carr's career?
I can tell you how I'm going to remember it. And I'm going to remember it this way. I thought that he was playing really, really well early in his career and suffered a brutal leg injury late in the season, you know, sort of getting around contract time, if I remember correctly. And then he finds himself on kind of one of these, you know, starter, non-starter contracts in Las Vegas. And everything in Las Vegas is falling apart, everything. The coach is getting fired because of emails that he sent. The star receiver is, you know, spending time in prison because of a drunk driving accident. And Derek Carr's leadership for that organization at that time, when there was all kinds of stuff that was going on inside the organization that, you know, you typically don't ask your quarterback to lead through. I thought Derek Carr did as good a job as you could possibly do leading through that time. So, like, I'm actually going to remember him as a guy that was a really good quarterback, but like the way his character showed through in like these really dark times for the Raiders, he impressed me through that about as much as you could press somebody.
Tim, Willie and I have had a couple of laughs about the overreaction that tends to come out of rookie mini camps around the NFL. It's not just here in Tennessee with Cam Ward. It's all over the NFL world. And teams put out those slickly produced videos on social media of the passes from the quarterback to the top rookie receiver, and everybody gets excited. We saw that here with Cam Ward.
X team might have found a long-term backup QB in UDFA, or backup cornerback, or a diamond in the rough at wide receiver. I mean,
Right.
these are what you see in May.
I saw a quote tweet from a Titans video. It was a clip of Cam Ward throwing to Xavier Restrepo. And a Titans fan quote tweeted it and said, 1,000-yard season incoming, I presume I hope it's a 1,000-yard season for Xavier Restrepo, because if Cam Ward throws for 1,000 yards, we've got problems. But I'm curious for your opinion about how much can we actually take away from Cam Ward at rookie minicamp?
I don't think you can take much away from it at all. I really don't. Like, you don't even have your whole team there. And so you're right. Like these, slickly produced videos, or, a beat reporter or team reporter being like, hey, 14 of 15 today, and that one incompletion was a drop. I don't think it means anything when you're just getting that little sample size. Now, I will say this, and I've said this before on this show, like, there are times when you get to the first mini camp and everybody's there, where like you'll have some veterans that maybe like a guy got drafted at your position, and right away you're like, nope, this guy's not going to take my job, And sometimes right away, like, yep, like that guy's a dude. Like that guy, he's gonna help us. He's gonna be a problem. Like I'll never forget. Like we were at the Giants one year, and I remember we threw with some young receivers that were drafted, and one was drafted higher than the other, and we threw one time. I just remember walking off the field with Eli, and it was just like we knew right away that the kid drafted later was actually better than the kid who was drafted earlier. He just was like, and you knew, and like you almost were like, I'm not sure what the scouting department saw, like because like we just we threw for 35 minutes and we figured it out. So. Look, I do think that when everyone's together, you can start to get a sense. I think that's one of the reasons why you'll see some of the veteran free agent signings after like the full, mini camp when veterans are there. But I think these early on rookie mini camps with mostly guys that are not going to make the team, I think there's almost nothing you can learn from them.
Tim Hasselbeck is with us. We're talking NFL football with him. Here's a headline from the ESPN page at this time of the year where you get this kind of content, a lot of rookie camps going on. This is out of the Jaguars camp. Why Travis Hunter is ready to become NFL star as first full-time two-way player in 60 years. Now, it's a really interesting. I'm not sure. I haven't read the article, so I haven't heard the case. But I would love your opinion on it, Tim, because I remember this being built up with Shohei Ohtani, who was at a different stage of his career when he came over, right, and was a two-way player in baseball. But the question was, can you do it? And I remember a longtime reliever who we used to talk to a lot, who was from this area, David Weathers, who pitched forever in Major League Baseball. He said, I don't think it can be done. I don't think you can play a position and pitch. And he was sort of right, because Ohtani has done it, but with a cost, right? He hasn't been able to do it for a long time. So I guess that's my question with Hunter, is there's no doubt that if you put him out there for a while, he will be a full-time two-way player. But what's the practicality of doing it long-term?
So there's a couple of things here that are striking me in this. First off, like the hype train that you just, read in the headline, okay,
Right.
The hype train. I'm feeling slighted by the show right now. But like, I feel like you guys should be tweeting stuff out, releasing, press releases, Ensworth, high school football coach and ESPN NFL analyst, and it's like hyping me up for like the two jobs that I have. Okay?
Yes,
like,
you're a two-way,
like
you're a multifaceted guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, can he sustain this, for, year over year?
Tim Hasselbeck, Renaissance man.
I mean, I don't.
Hasselbeck feeling the effects of burnout with this extra load that he's carrying.
I do. I feel like you guys are not, promoting me as much as Travis Hunter is getting promoted. And honestly, I feel slighted.
Okay.
In fact,
We'll
Let's
take
work
that
on a
under
new-
advisement.
Yes, we'll get a new marketing campaign
listen,
pronto.
Hey, as soon as I'm off this, I'm calling Chase to be like, hey
Yes.
man, like we're like this
We need to
is
hype
not
this
how
up.
friends treat each other. Here's where I think Willie, it's going to get tricky for Hunter. Is they're not going to pay him as a receiver and a defensive back, and so it's no different. Like, look, we've seen Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey's been one of the best corners in the NFL. Well, now he's moving to safety. He's trying to elongate his career to maximize his earning potential as a player in the National Football League. And so, look, when you play 60 snaps a game, that's very different than playing 80 snaps a game. It just is over time when you're playing a 17 and who knows, maybe an 18-game season and all of that stuff. And so as you're Travis Hunter and you look at it and you go, wait a minute, okay, so let's say he's a receiver. I'm getting paid as one of the elite receivers in the NFL, but I'm playing 45 snaps a game more than that other guy, and the average NFL career is 3 years. Like, what am I doing? Like, yes, I can do this, but is it really worth it? Look, Champ Bailey, if he wanted to, could have played corner and receiver. He's a teammate of mine in Washington, and oh my word, like he was unbelievable. And he did play some offensive snaps, but it wasn't many. And so, I guess I would just say that, like, can he do it? Yeah, he probably can do it for a little while, but he's going to end up looking at it and say, is this really the best deal? And, Will, this, especially in baseball, think about the guys that, like, hey, they were catchers, right? But hey, let's get him, out from behind the dish there
Right.
so that he can play longer. It's really no different than that. And I think ultimately that will, outweigh the idea of playing on both sides of the ball.
You mentioned the contractual part of it, which does come into play, like what the franchise tag is and for one position as opposed to another. And that might cloud things too. But I do wonder, as they move forward, can they be on the same page as, okay, Travis, this is the best way for you to be effective and for us to get the most value out of you, even if it's not the ideal thing that you envision, which you've been your whole career, which is you play every snap.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would just say this, like, I think it's much easier to be a defensive starter and then have a small menu of plays as an offensive player. I think it's much easier to do that. I think it's much more difficult to be a full-time offensive player and then learn what you need to learn on defense. Because when you call an offensive play, like, you're dictating it, you know what it is. So when you break the huddle, like, what you're doing. You might have a route adjustment based on the coverage or something like that. But, if you call a defensive play, like, you have no idea the formation that they're going to get into, the motion that they're going to get into. Like, and so now just the communication and adjustment that it takes to play on the defensive side of the ball, I think it's too much unless you're going to be very basic when that guy's in on defense. So I think there are other challenges to this that are different than doing it in college. But look, just like Jimmy Graham, when he was up and the Saints at the time were trying to franchise him as a tight end, and he's like, wait a minute, guys, I play more snaps outside the numbers than I do as an inline tight end. So if you're going to franchise me, you're franchising me as a wide receiver. Well, like, they got into, kind of a big battle on that. Well, what if the franchise numbers are very different for the corners and the receivers? And if that's the case, then Travis, the desire to be this two-way player is going to go away.
Yeah, I'm looking, well, I don't know if I'm looking forward to it, but I think that, especially with the Jaguars in the same division as the Titans, we're going to be watching closely to see how this plays out. Meanwhile, Tim, the Steelers, I'm curious, if you're in their camp, what do you think's going through their mind right now as to how to play their cards? We just, in our last segment before you came on, we're talking about Kirk Cousins and how he kind of would love to maybe be on the free agent market so he could maybe pick and choose where to go rather than to sit there and wait and the Falcons hold on to him. You've got the Aaron Rodgers drama it's always out there. What do you think the Steelers are thinking right now?
I think that the Steelers, now I'm not reporting this. This is what I think. I think the Steelers know that Aaron Rodgers is playing. And I think the Steelers are in full anticipation that he'll be their quarterback. I'm not reporting that, but here's why I think that. We joked about it, I believe, last week or 2 weeks ago. 40-something-year-old quarterbacks don't put cleats on and go throw if they're done playing. You don't. You're done doing it. You don't do that. And so, Aaron Rodgers has visited Pittsburgh, spent time with Mike Tomlin. I think there had to be a conversation where it's like, look, you guys don't draft a quarterback in the first or second round. I will come play for you guys in that type of environment. And, this is how I like to spend my off season, but when it comes down to it, I'll be there. Again, not reporting that, but I think that gave the Pittsburgh Steelers the confidence to go through the draft and not draft a quarterback. I really don't think Kirk Cousins is the option there because, you would have to eat a bunch of his contract. Kirk would have to waive a no trade clause. I think it's just way too complicated to have the Kirk Cousins thing work out there. And so I agree with you that Kirk would much rather go be a starter somewhere, but I think it's too difficult to make it happen. I think what's easy is Aaron Rodgers on a 1-year deal. That's what I think is easy. And I think that happens the closer we get to the summertime. And so are you nervous if you're Pittsburgh? Yeah, you're probably a little nervous, but you probably have some pretty good confidence based on, Aaron throwing with DK Metcalf, in California and the conversation that Mike Tomlin was able to have with Aaron Rodgers that he's going to end up in a Steelers uniform this year.
All right. Final follow-up on this, because the Titans have gone through it. The Saints now with the Carr news are forced to almost have no choice but to go into rebuilding mode for a while. And you could argue that they probably should have done it sooner than now. Just like you could have argued a couple years ago when Mike Vrabel was telling everybody, you don't rebuild in the NFL. And he was saying, hey, look at this division. We can win this division. Let's hang on with Tannehill and et cetera. We can maybe make one more run. I think the Steelers are kind of in that mode. They play in a really tough division. So much has been made that they've not had a losing record. But what's best case with Rodgers? And would they be almost better off just taking the step back to take the 2 steps forward?
Yeah, they may. But I don't know that. I don't know that Rodgers, forces doesn't help them ultimately get there. Does that make sense? From a standpoint of, you're not mortgaging your future because Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback this year, on a 1 year, who knows what it is, a 1 year, $40 million deal. I'm not saying that's what it is, but I don't know that mortgages your future. I think Dallas's situation is much more in line with, do you really want to double down on this in Dallas with that contract and the fact that you're going to have him for years? So, I think you can try to be competitive with Rodgers and the guys that you have right now. And, kind of like the scenario you're explaining with, the Titans and Ryan Tannehill. But I also don't think that prevents you from, a year from now drafting a quarterback and saying hey, we're starting over and it's okay. We still feel good about our roster. Because I don't think it'll be a long-term commitment to Rodgers, which is why I actually think it makes a little bit of sense for Pittsburgh. And I think it makes sense for Rodgers because it's his only place to be a starter. And look, we've talked about Bo Nix, on NFL Live. Last week I'm actually talking about him again on NFL Live today. He threw 29 touchdown passes last year. We probably would all agree Bo Nix had a fantastic rookie year. Fair? Fair to say that? Aaron Rodgers threw 28 touchdowns last year. So, I do think sometimes all right, if Pittsburgh can get almost 30 touchdowns and fewer than 10 interceptions out of Aaron Rodgers, they might win 11 games. So I understand it from Pittsburgh's perspective.
Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst, head coach of the Ensworth Tigers. Dual threat. triple threat, perhaps, if you have another hidden talent that we need to know
The
about.
first media / coach star in 60 years in Nashville.
Generational, some would say.
I mean, can we get the headlines, please? I mean, let's
Yes.
go. Can we
We're just workshopping this now. The
Yes.
billboards will be up around town very soon.
You know what? So we'll do like a little like photo shoot so it can go on Instagram and stuff too.
Yes,
like
we
the
definitely need a
hype
graphics
man, the
design person.
video. Yeah,
Yes.
that goes with it. Okay. I'm like, well, look, I will say I was at the Savannah Bananas the other night. What night was that? Saturday night.
Yes.
And I did see Cam Ward. It was quite the ovation for Cam Ward when he got introduced to the huge crowd at Nissan. So
Was that the
Yeah,
first
the
time
hype
you'd
man-
ever been to a Savannah? I've never been to a Savannah Bananas.
hey, listen to this.
Were
First
you
time-
thumbs up on this?
So first time, definitely thumbs up on this, and I'm not making this up. So Elizabeth and I would go with our two boys, and so the way it works is like somebody hits a foul ball. If you catch it, then the batter's out.
Right.
So we're kind of behind the net on the first baseline, but a foul ball comes to us, and my son Taylor catches the foul ball, and so we're like, so the batter's out. So I'm like, oh, okay, wait a second. Then he ends up in the dugout, like with the team, because he's in the. So I'm like,
Because he's on the score sheet now. He recorded it out. He gets the put out.
hey, so listen, it was a good experience prior to that. It was even a better experience once, my son catches a foul ball for an out and ends up in the dugout. So it was great. It was really great.
Very
crazy.
cool. Tim Hasselbeck, ESPN NFL analyst. What can't this guy do? He joins us every week on the program. Tim, great stuff. We'll
Could have
talk
caught the
next
foul
week.
ball. His son beat him to it.
Yeah,
Too
it's
slow.
Fair. It's fair. He reached up over me and caught it. It's kind of embarrassing.
Thanks,
Kind of
Tim.
embarrassing. Good call. See you, fellas.
Tim Hasselbeck on the program. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, what are some lessons the Predators can learn from the remaining teams in the Stanley Cup playoffs? We'll discuss that next. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 1025, 1063, The Game. D Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 the game. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan here with you. The Stanley Cup playoffs continue tonight. Only one game in the NHL tonight. Jets at Stars. Miro Heiskanen is expected to return to the Stars lineup tonight. They're up 2-1 in the series, if I'm not mistaken. So the Stars looking to go up 3-1 on the Jets with their star defenseman re-entering the lineup after being out since what, January?
More or less, yes. He did not play in the Four Nations face-off. That was in February. So I believe that's right. He's been out since January.
It's been a minute since we've seen Miro
Yeah.
Heiskanen, and the Stars will look to take a 3-1 lead at home in the series against
And
the
if you're not
Winnipeg
familiar
Jets.
with their roster, it's a very balanced roster. If you are a hockey fan,
If
we
you're
have-
a Predators fan, you see it 4 or 5 times a year.
yes, and if you're a Predator fan, you know that has been a discussion that we've had the last 2 or 3 years, is how things have worked out really well for Dallas in a number of ways. They have a very balanced roster, and it's been put together in a unique way. They did not have to tank and have to be bad for a long time to build what looks like a championship roster this year. They haven't won it, but if you look at the last few years, they've been in the mix, and they've done so without having to have the top 5 pick in the draft year in, year out. Heiskanen is the only guy in the recent times, right? That was what was a top 5 pick, and they won the lottery to move up several spots, kind of like Utah did. He wasn't the first pick, but they moved up from sort of a mediocre spot to get him. But other than that, they've hit on a lot of lower first-round picks and non-first-round picks that we've talked about.
So what lessons can the Predators learn from the team still playing in the Stanley Cup playoffs? There are 2 that come to mind. And I think one of them, Willie and I might disagree on. The first is it's a star-driven league at this point. You look at the players making an impact on a nightly basis for these teams. I know it's easy to just go to the point leaders, but Mikko Rantanen, who is the prime example of this, Connor McDavid, William Nylander, Leon Draisaitl, Kyle Connor, they're making a difference. The Predators desperately need that type of player. Now, the way you get that type of player is by usually getting the number 1 or number 2 pick in the NHL draft, which the Predators unfortunately did not get this time around. But Rantanen, to me, Willie, is the prime example because a lot of you know the story. Rantanen played for the Avalanche for several years, was Nathan McKinnon's trusty line mate, put up huge numbers. They could not agree to a contract. They trade him to the Carolina Hurricanes. It's reported that Rantanen doesn't want to sign long-term with the Hurricanes. So less than 2 months after arriving in Raleigh, he's off to Dallas. And he has been outstanding in these playoffs. The Colorado Avalanche have plenty of stars. Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar. I bet they wish they still had Mikko Rantanen, another star on that team. And the Avalanche, they prioritize depth. When they traded Rantanen, they got Marty Necas, they got Jack Drury, they traded for Brock Nelson at the deadline. And depth is good, but you need those top of the line players to succeed in the Stanley Cup playoffs, which the Predators unfortunately do not have. So it's not a lesson that is easy to take, but it's one thing that stands out to me so far about these playoffs.
Yes, I think that's always going to be the case. I think the Predators' star power can change year in and year out. But the thing that jumps out at me more than anything else is the teams that are left can all defend. And they can really dig in and suppress offense from the other team. And that's how you counteract the star power to some degree. And the teams that are left all excel in team defense. And goaltending is a part of that. But I'm looking a little bit more at the defensive structure. And it doesn't mean that you're doing this at the expense of offense, because the best teams can score, but they can also defend. But I think the defending part is a little underrated. I'm looking at the Sport Logic graph of expected goals against, and I see Winnipeg, I see Florida, I see Vegas, I see Edmonton. Edmonton is not known for defense. They're certainly not known for goaltending. But the reality is they play pretty good team defense in terms of expected goals against. And I think when they need to defend, especially in the playoffs, they know how to sort of hunker down and get the defense that they're looking for.
5 of the top 10 teams in the regular season in expected goals against per game are still alive in the playoffs.
There you go.
Vegas, Florida, Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Carolina.
Carolina is one that I didn't mention, but yes, Carolina would probably be the one team that lacks the star power that you're talking about, right?
Yes.
But their team
They are such a
analytics are
unique
very
case.
good. Yes.
They're
on the verge of knocking out the number 1 seed.
What's the
in the
saying? They're
Capitals.
greater than the sum of their parts.
Yes.
That is what the Carolina Hurricanes are. Here's how I would counteract that point about defense, because the old adage is defense wins championships.
Yes.
Right.
And I subscribe to that.
And the Predators absolutely need to improve defensively. A lot of the attention, understandably, on the Predators this season was their inability to score because
which
of
was glaring.
Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault coming in 2 40-goal scorers. I've said this multiple times. The Predators were the first team in NHL history to acquire 2 40-goal scorers in the same offseason, meaning players who scored 40 goals the previous season, not players who had scored 40 goals in their careers at some point. But defensively, that drop-off was just as glaring. It went sort of under the radar, I think, because of how bad it was on the offensive end. But I did find this to be interesting, Willie. The first round averaged 6.5 goals per game, the second highest total in any opening round in the past 30 years, behind 1995, which was 6.8 goals per game. So I do think that defense is important. However, I do think that being able to score and being able to score in different ways and being able to score in high pressure situations is just as vital. I think it might be taking a little bit more importance than maybe defensive play.
I think the easy answer is that you have to have both. I think part of what we're saying, one thing that has stood out to me is power plays, right? The power play is converting as a league at a higher rate than it has in a long, long time, something like 30 or 40 years. So that's a big element, is that that I think is common. You do not want to commit a penalty when you're playing the Oilers, the Maple Leafs, the Panthers. Like they have deadly power plays. So that's part of it too. And that's how maybe that's maybe how the goal scoring is up a little bit more, is the percentage of conversion of the power plays. It's just so hard to stop those right now. And we're sort of leaving out a very important part, and that is, who's your goalie? Is your goalie going to be able to withstand the barrage of these high-skilled teams? So I think you're making a good point, Adam, but I think the offense jumps out at you. It's the headliner, but I think sometimes it sort of has you overlooking how well these teams defend to contain a Draisaitl, a McDavid, a McKinnon. Like if you don't have it together against those teams, they will light you up. And in the playoffs, I think that we haven't seen a lot of super high scoring games. Although you're right, there's more goal scoring, but that's why I think the product is so good. They are finding a way to score. But I think you look up sometimes the shots are something like 22-18 sometimes.
But the quality is
the
up.
Quality. Yeah, I guess
Right.
that's a fair thing.
Right. The shots are down. I think just the shot counter you see on the scoreboard, I feel like that is down, but the quality of opportunities is up, except if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, who just shoot the puck from everywhere.
They're a little in a different school. They're about the volume.
They're the old school. They're more volume than quality.
You're right. That is something that if you listen closely and you pay attention, that is a trend right now. Is teams are more selective on how they shoot. They're not just going to, quote, warm up the goalie with long shots. The exception is Carolina, where they just want to flood so many shots, even if they're not quality.
Look for
towards
rebounds,
the net.
second chance opportunities.
Somewhere in there, they're going to get a bounce, and it's
Yeah.
working for them right now.
Yeah, they're up 3-1 on the Washington Capitals. So we will keep an eye on the Stanley Cup playoffs. What lessons do you think the Predators should take
Right.
away from the Stanley Cup playoffs?
But let's talk about the Predators' defense right now and how
Mhm.
far they are. I think that was a telling part. Again, overshadowed by the fact that they couldn't score. But my theory is if they could fix the defensive part of their game and give more, like this is the adage that Chris Mason says all the time about goaltending. If you are predictable, if your defense can be whatever way you choose to defend, if it's predictable and your goalie knows where the shots are going to come from, that is a way that you succeed. And I do think UC Saros is just as good as he's ever been. I do not believe in the theory that he's aging or he's not as good as he used to be. I think it's much more about how they play in front of him. If they can be consistent, I think he is a guy that can still elevate, kind of like Connor Hellebuck elevates the Jets.
Except on the road in the playoffs.
Except on the road in the playoffs. And look, this is always the question with all the goalies is, can you get it done in the postseason? But it certainly helps if you can be consistent with your structure in front. But that, to me, was the biggest reason why the team completely flopped. The goal scoring was secondary to me.
Quickly, I just want to list the goalies, the starting goalies for the teams that are still alive in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Connor Hellebuck in Winnipeg, Jay Gottinger in Dallas, Sergei Bobrovsky in Florida. Joseph Wall is starting for the Maple Leafs because Anthony Stolarz is injured. Stuart Skinner was pulled in Edmonton for Calvin Pickard, who is now injured, and now they're back to Stuart Skinner. Vegas has Aiden Hill. Carolina has Freddie Anderson. Washington has Logan Thompson. Are there any themes you're picking up on the types of goalies that are still alive in the playoffs?
It's mixed. There are some teams that have the high-paid goalie. Bobrovsky, Ottinger, Hellebuck would be that category. I would say that Vegas and now Washington have identified that these guys are pretty important and paid them a decent amount. Not in the stratosphere of Vezina Trophy
Aiden
winners.
Hill and Logan Thompson.
Right. Those
who
guys
were teammates in Vegas.
Yes, they were.
Yes.
That's the weird part about it. But they are guys that have earned the next contract at a pretty good raise. They're not just taken off the street. And I would imagine that Joseph Woll is going in that direction. I think Stolarz is probably earning himself. But did he sign a one-year deal with Toronto?
I can't recall what the contract was, but he was really good in limited playing time for the Panthers last season. So he was actually quite good for the Maple Leafs this season. So
the Oilers are the outlier to me, who they have just not, they have been stuck with these two guys. And I think if there was any way they could upgrade, they would have.
Yeah, Pickard won all of those games for Edmonton after he replaced
I don't know
Skinner,
how I honestly don't know how
his numbers were not good.
I don't know how he does it, honestly, but I give him credit for being about as good as he can be. But he's still the Achilles heel. And the same thing is true with Skinner. Those are the guys that have everybody holding their breath. If they had the lights out goalie, I think the Oilers would have won 2 cups by now. Do you agree with that theory?
It certainly wouldn't hurt. 615-737-1025. We'll take your thoughts on what lessons you think the Predators should learn from the remaining teams in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And we will wrap up the show coming up next. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063 The Game.
Hey, are you maxed out on credit cards or struggling with the high interest debt that those credit card bills or car payments or other things that come attached to interest rates? Well, Loan Pronto has a solution for you. Their Rapid Equity Loan. You can get cash out now from your home's equity without touching your low-rate first mortgage. No appraisals, no waiting, no BS. With the Rapid Equity Loan program at Loan Pronto, you can do something like this. Get $300,000 approved from your home's equity in under 24 hours, and then make the plan. Pay off debt, renovate your kitchen or your bathroom. And in doing so, you can still cut your monthly expenses by a lot. Instant approvals, low rates, no hard credit pull up front. Find out more about what you can do with your home's equity through the rapid equity loan from Loan Pronto. Call now, 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com. That's 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166-1781 on approved credit, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
I'm not saying these lotteries were rigged, but if we ever found out 60 years later that a lottery was rigged, these would be my candidates. Here's my list. Number 1, Patrick Ewing, New York Knicks, 1985, with the 7 envelopes, and whether they froze the side of one of them. It would have been the easiest one to rig, put it that way. Number 2 is the Kyrie Cleveland 2011 after LeBron went to Miami. Number 3 was the 2019. Thanks for trading Anthony Davis to the Lakers. Now here's Zion Williamson. Number 4 was thanks for buying the New Orleans basketball team. Here's young Anthony Davis as your prize, 2012. Number 5 was the 2014. Man, LeBron just needs one more asset and he might go back to Cleveland. We'll give them the number 1 pick. And then number 6 for me would be LeBron in Cleveland in 2003, sending him home, back to Ohio, home versus sending him to Memphis. So I'm not saying the NBA rigs the lotteries. I'm just saying if we ever found out 60 years from now that there was more than one shooter for JFK and there was one rigged lottery, those would be my choices.
That was Bill Simmons reacting to the Dallas Mavericks winning the draft lottery with 1.8% odds last night. Congratulations to the Dallas Mavericks. Please take care of Cooper Flagg for me. You'll be quite pleased. But the conspiracy theories abound, Willie Donick.
It's just what's fun about sports sometimes. I mean, all facets of this. And Bill Simmons might be the best at articulating stuff like that. I mean, that's just, 30. What year was Patrick Ewing? 85?
Yes.
Something like that. I mean, that's going on
40
40
years.
years.
A basketball historian.
40 years of history.
Yes.
In one take where he would have you believe that there are 6 times that they've rigged the
I'm not saying it was rigged, but if it was, these would be the times.
Right. He's really good at that.
Yes, he is. A couple of texts on our Predators conversation. One texter says, I guess I'm confused on the goalie versus defenseman debate. If a goalie turns into Swiss cheese because of the defense, how can he also elevate the team when the defense plays well? To me, that's the defense elevating the team.
I think we're learning that the defense plays a big, big part of it. I think there was a time where you could be very shoddy defensively and a great goalie could erase a lot of mistakes. I think that's becoming much tougher to do in this day and age. The way teams have studied how to attack a goalie and where the quality areas on the ice are. I think they have a much better sense of that. It's kind of like the discovery of the three-point shot in the NBA. I think, there are better shooters. There are more good shooters in the NHL than there ever have been, and they know where you have to take the shots from. That's part of why you see less shots on goal, because everybody's looking for the high quality. And so no matter how good your defense, or no matter how good your goalie is, you will exploit that goalie if you get a certain amount of that quality. Cross-ice completed passes, shots from the inner slot. Those are the types of terminology you're hearing now.
Yes.
This is relatively new stuff. So I don't think there are a lot of goalies out there that are Swiss cheese. There's a lot of really good goalies out there, but I still think there is something special about a small portion of the goalies. I still believe that UC Saros is in that category, but you have to play good defense. I think what happened to them this year, and Kevin Woodley, I think, articulated it, who studies goalies more than anybody that I know, with the numbers to go with his observations. His theory was that UC Saros elevated the Predators until about, what did he say? On into December, maybe?
It was the first third
of
the
the season or so,
if I recall correctly.
He was playing well above. He was keeping the defense,
but they weren't scoring.
They weren't scoring. He was keeping them in games, and then his play leveled off because it's just so hard to overcome bad defense for an entire season.
Quickly, one texter, John in Nashville, says, a good offense/goal scorer takes the life out of another team. How many times in hockey games do you see a close game until 2 relatively close back-to-back goals are scored? The other team just looks deflated. That's sort of my point about the star-driven league.
Philip Forsberg has got that.
I wouldn't put Philip Forsberg on the same level as some of the other guys we were talking about, though. He has that capability, but I would not put Philip Forsberg in that same stratosphere.
As who?
As the Rantanens and Draisaitl's and McDavids and McKinnons of the world.
But I mean, the Predators are never going to have that guy. I don't think, not anytime soon. I don't even think with the 5th pick in the draft they're going to get somebody. It's unlikely. I think they hope to have a guy maybe like Forsberg. I mean, those guys are important. But
Yes.
you're talking about the top 0.1% of the league.
Mm-hmm.
Rantanen, McKinnon, like who would be in this category that you're talking about?
The top tier?
Yeah, the very, very top tier.
Draisaitl, McKinnon, McDavid,
Yeah.
Rantanen. I would put William Nylander in that mix probably.
You would put Nylander, I'd say
He might be on the
close.
cusp.
I'd say he's a level down from Rantanen, Draisaitl, McDavid. Right?
Yeah, no. I would say he's probably on the line between the top tier and the second tier.
I would
say.
put Nylander maybe slightly above Forsberg, but not that far ahead.
We'll have to leave it here, but it is a good
Predators need more. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll do it for us today.
Oh, one second. Before we forget, today is Connor Newt's 21st birthday. So happy birthday, Connor.
Happy birthday, Connor. You're legal to drink, at least. That'll do it for us today. I will be on with Robbie Stanley tomorrow from 6 to 9 a.m. Willie and Derek will be on tomorrow from noon to 3 as we continue to shuffle the deck. But Chasing Big Joe is coming up next. On behalf of Derek Mason, be loved, love on your people. Have a wonderful Tuesday. Peace.